Hi, everybody, and welcome to Love Fraud Live. Sociopaths manipulate and exploit everyone in their lives, but they don't want their new targets to find out. So, how do they keep you from believing the reports of their bad behavior? I'm Donna Anderson, author of LoveFraud.com and host of the True Love Fraud Stories podcast. Tonight, I'll explain trash talking and other tricks sociopaths use to convince you to ignore bad reports about them. At the end of my short presentation, I'll answer your questions. So to be notified about my upcoming YouTube videos, please hit the subscribe button. Okay, let's get started. The sociopath's greatest skill is probably impression management. They are excellent at presenting themselves in a positive light, even when they have a long history of abusive relationships, exploitation, unstable finances, and even criminal convictions. One of their tricks is priming you in advance to ignore warnings from others. The most fundamental strategy to prevent you from learning what they truly are, which is lying, cheating parasites, is to keep you from finding or meeting anyone who knows about their past. This is one reason why sociopaths typically move around a lot. When they've caused too many problems in one town, they relocate to a new town where nobody knows them or what they've done. So if you suggest visiting their hometown or family members, sociopaths often discourage it. They'll say the town is boring and their relatives are jerks. But just in case you will have a chance to talk to people from the sociopath's past, they lay the groundwork to make sure you ignore reports of their bad behavior. When sociopaths have you on the hook, but not quite reeled in, they don't want you to escape. If they learn that relatives who warned previous targets now know about you, they spring into action. So, how do sociopaths head off a bad report? They tell you that their sister or daughter or whomever may call you and trash talk about them because the relatives are traitors who don't want them to find happiness. Or they say the relatives hated them when they were young and are still holding some kind of a grudge. Or the sociopaths will strike first and trash talk the family members and their former friends, saying they're losers and cannot be trusted. The objective here is to make people with prior experience with the sociopath and who know their history to appear to be not credible. This approach extends to the most common play in the sociopath playbook, claiming that all their former partners are crazy, mentally disturbed, or need to be on medication. Sociopaths often start saying this immediately, as soon as you ask about their previous relationships. The objective is to make sure that if you ever talk with one of their exes, you don't believe the stories you hear. Sometimes sociopaths use another tactic. They may actually admit to unsavory behavior from their past, although they typically embellish it with the admission with excuses. For example, sociopaths may acknowledge that the divorce dragged on for 4 years, blaming it on the spouse who wanted all the money or didn't want to share the kids. Of course, not on their own vindictiveness. So yeah, the separation was ugly, but it wasn't the sociopath's fault. When it comes to money, sociopaths may actually admit that they are broke. But again, it's because all the money was spent taking care of the family or on some other noble cause. Or some boss or customer didn't pay them what they were owed. In any event, it's not their fault. They even sometimes admit to a poor credit history, This one I know from experience. My ex-husband, James Montgomery, insisted that I had to sign the leasing agreement for his new car because he was an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs always have poor credit. Needless to say, I was stuck paying for the car. Sociopaths may even admit that they have criminal records, but again, they were framed, or the cops were out to get them, or somebody else committed the crime, but they heroically took the rap. Another strategy is to admit that they deserved to be convicted, but they've learned their lesson and they've changed. As a result of these strategies, instead of running for the hills like you should, you may actually develop a positive impression of the sociopath. And here's why. Number one, you feel sorry for them and you're determined to give them a second chance. Here's number two. You may feel that by revealing their past, they're being honest with you and are therefore trustworthy. And finally, here's number three. You may feel that they're taking responsibility for their actions and turning over a new leaf. But remember, once they are adults, sociopaths do not change. So when you find yourself betrayed, used, or exploited by the sociopath, what happens to you? You experience cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is typically defined as the mental discomfort caused by holding two conflicting beliefs, attitudes, or values at the same time. But my colleague, Dr. Leanne Leadham, defines the term more precisely. She says that cognitive dissonance occurs when you become invested in your initial positive impression of a person or an idea, and then when you get information indicating that your belief is wrong, you ignore the new information in order to hold on to your belief. So here's how cognitive dissonance works in relation to a sociopath. First, you form a positive belief about the sociopath. Second, you experience or learn something that contradicts your initial positive belief. And third, you can't hold both your positive belief and the new negative information in your mind simultaneously. So you disregard the bad news, even if it's true, to hold on to your belief. Sociopaths set you up for cognitive dissonance right from the beginning. They encourage you to believe what they tell you and not whatever damaging information you hear later on. Unfortunately, it often works. Many people keep believing the sociopath until they have been so damaged that they have no choice but to accept that the sociopath really is a lying, cheating parasite. So, how do you overcome cognitive dissonance and see the truth of the sociopath's behavior before you suffer too much damage? Here's LOVEFRAUD's 3-step plan for protecting yourself. First, know that sociopaths exist, and you already know that. 2, learn the warning signs. They're in my book, Red Flags of Love Fraud. And 3, listen to your intuition. Your intuition is absolutely your best defense against sociopaths. Your gut will typically warn you when something is wrong about the person or the relationship. In fact, you probably already sensed it, which is why you asked the questions about the sociopath's past in the first place. So when your intuition tells you something is wrong, don't let the sociopath talk you into ignoring your instincts. Pay attention and take action. That's the presentation for tonight. If you've been lied to and exploited and now find yourself dealing with cognitive dissonance, I can help you to understand what happened. I can also help you to overcome the emotional pain and betrayal with my guided mindfulness technique and Reiki. For more information, please visit lovefraud.com/talk to Donna. I also want to make sure you know all about the True Love Fraud Stories podcast. In this series, I interview people about their experiences with sociopaths, always dramatic stories, and then I talk to experts on topics that come up during these stories. So you can listen to True Love Fraud Stories wherever you get your podcasts, and also on YouTube and YouTube Music, or at lovefraud.com/podcast. So please subscribe to Love Fraud Live. When you subscribe, you'll automatically be notified about all my new videos. And plus, you'll boost the distribution of Love Fraud Live, so you'll help to spread the word about all these dangerous sociopaths who live among us. If you want more information, you can also subscribe to the Love Fraud newsletter. You'll find many helpful links in the window below this video. So now, I'll answer your questions. Okay, well, we'll wait while people are still watching the whole video. You might be interested to hear some more examples about sociopaths hiding their past, so I can tell you that from my own experience. My ex-husband, James Montgomery, came to the United States from Australia. So he definitely got out of town. I didn't know it in the beginning, but later on I did find out that he had married a woman, started a business with her, and everything fell apart and left her heavily in debt. Sounds familiar? That's exactly what happened to me. So, but he didn't stop with that. Other things that he did was, I was not his first victim when he came to the United States. In fact, there were, actually 20 or 30 women that he was involved with, but I personally spoke with about 4 or 5 of them. And in one of those cases, he had claimed that he was in special forces, Australian special forces, which wasn't true. And he had participated in the raid, the invasion of Grenada back in 1983, which also wasn't true. But what he told me was how his wife at the time, who was in the United States, disrespected his involvement in this effort and essentially just gave him a hard time. And so he ordered her away from the base. So that was his story. Obviously trashing his ex so that I wouldn't want to reach out to her and find out what really went on. And then also what he did, he was cheating with a woman that he met after me, someone that he met online, and was trying to have her work on his projects like he did with me. And so he was happy to tell her that I was stupid and incompetent. I was like his employee, never mentioned that I was his wife, but I was his stupid and incompetent employee, trashing me so that she didn't reach out to me. Of course, I eventually reached out to her. We compared notes, and that's when we found out what was really going on. So another question might be, why do you fall for it? Why does anybody fall for this stuff? And it's kind of important to understand the psychology of how we get into these situations. So all relationships are essentially psychological bonds that form with other people. And the bond is established in the beginning through pleasure. And if any of you have been love bombed, or, you know how good sociopaths are making the beginning of any involvement to be highly pleasurable. So that's what gets the connection started. But then what they do is that they do things that cause fear and anxiety for you. You may catch them lying, they may stand you up, they may lash out to you for no apparent reason. And this has the effect of creating fear and anxiety in you, primarily the fear and anxiety of losing this wonderful relationship that you've been enjoying so far. So that actually makes the psychological bond that you feel stronger. And then you want your relationship to go back to how wonderful it was in the beginning. So you try and find out what's wrong. You want to talk, you kiss and make up, and that makes the bond stronger again. So this keeps going, and this is the beginning of establishing a trauma bond. In addition to that, there are chemical reasons why you get stuck in these situations. Perhaps you've heard of the neurotransmitter and hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is released through intimacy, and that's any kind of intimacy, hugging, talking, and certainly intimacy like sex. And the effect of oxytocin is to make you trust the other person. So when you have all this oxytocin flowing through your body, you trust the person. There's another chemical, dopamine, and dopamine is associated with addiction. So it's also what gives you a charge when you're involved with, and excited about this relationship. So dopamine makes the relationship addictive. So these are also reasons why you don't want to believe it when you start hearing bad reports about the person. Okay, so we have a comment here. Just Phil says, take your time in relationships so you don't have children with these people. That's really good advice. I definitely advise not having children with these people. Taking time is helpful, but not always foolproof. A lot of people say that, that all you have to do is, go slow and you'll be able to figure it out. Well, sociopaths, unfortunately, are capable of maintaining their charade absolutely as long as necessary in order to reel in their target. And I've had plenty of people tell me this. In fact, I can think of one story, a woman who filled out one of our surveys. Actually, it was the survey for this book, where she said that she spent 4 years dating this person, this guy. And for 4 years, it was perfect. It was great. It was wonderful. The day they got married, it all changed. And that happens a fair amount. I've heard similar stories like that in other cases, that as soon as they feel like they've won their prize, you've signed the dotted line, that's it. They don't have to put the effort in anymore, and the real personality comes out. And this is shocking. So that's why I say, taking time is great. I wish I had taken time. Would it have made any difference? I don't know. But it's not foolproof. They are quite capable of stringing you along and keeping the mask up as long as necessary. Okay. Okay, so Amanda asks, I'm divorced from my sociopathic ex, and he is not able to exploit me anymore. Congratulations, that's great. He tries to trash talk me to the kids, and my son doesn't buy it, but my daughter does. So how should I approach this issue? Could you please type in another comment of how old your kids are? That would be helpful, because it does kind of matter what age everybody is as far as, what your options are. A lot of people involved with advising this type of situation, because that could actually be considered a certain level of parental alienation, when he's, trying to trash talk you to the kids. While the kids are minor, okay, son is 14, daughter is 16. All right. Okay, so they're a little older. But while they're minors, they advise you, not to say anything negative. And that probably will still apply at this age, 14 and 16. But a couple things. Kids are smart, and they see what's going on. And I've had plenty of people tell me that, you know, the kids knew that the disordered parent was a problem before their non-disordered parent was. And I've heard of cases where, you know, the semi-healthy parent, who at least was healthy before you get involved with this person, says, "Oh, I'm getting a divorce," and they're like, "About time," you know. So that can happen. Um, it can be difficult because it also depends on how susceptible a kid is to the manipulation of the father in this case, or the sociopath. Um, and that can be hard, you know, because some kids are more likely to be manipulated. It's so far it sounds like your son is seeing what's going on, but maybe your daughter isn't. My guess is your ex is trying to bribe her, you know, maybe buying her things or letting her do whatever she wants when she's around him. And some kids fall for that. I personally think that when it's age appropriate, and it may not be at this age, but later on, you know, when they're 20s, I mean, I think it's kind of important to figure out a way to communicate the truth about the disordered parent, or at least kind of hint at it, you know, and you know, because what happens, I mean, I've had people, you know, who have kids in their like 20s and 30s, you know, adults, and they still don't want to reveal what really happened because of the father's true nature or the sociopath's true nature. And that can be a problem, you know, because everybody needs to know that there are disordered people out there. And perhaps you had the experience, oh yes, he gave her a car. Okay, that'll do it. So he's bribing her, and she is she's fallen for it. So probably in that case, you want to continue to be as loving and straightforward with her as possible. Um, and maybe the time will come where you'll be able to reveal a little bit more of the truth of what happened. Certainly when they're older. And I think the reason that this is important is because, as I started to say, we all need to know that these disordered people are out there. And often it will explain a lot. I mean, if your kids, once they have the ability to evaluate or maybe process, you know, what has gone on, it may answer questions for them as far as, you know, why the father behaved the way that he did. Because the other thing is that, you know, sociopaths make terrible parents. And even though maybe he gave your daughter a car, um, he probably also may have been cruel and negligent, and maybe critical, and maybe embarrassing them. So you know, there are kids typically have it tough with disordered parents, and you know, when you're a kid, you don't have the skills or the ability to deal with that, so you kind of take it in and you think it's your fault. You think that the disordered parent is treating you this way badly, because you did something wrong, or there's something wrong with you, or it's your fault. So at some point, this is a very damaging belief, and at some point, it's probably a good idea for the child to know that it was never their fault, and that the parent has a problem, and that's why he behaved the way he did, or she behaved, if for, you know, disordered mothers. And I've heard horror stories about disordered mothers. So that's the main thing. You know, at some point, I think you want to reveal that the person is disordered, so that the kids can stop feeling responsible for the way they were treated. And that can help a lot at some point. But this is very tricky. It's a very difficult situation. And I say that you probably want to pay close attention to your instincts, and just be ready. I mean, sometime you might be having a conversation, and you'll have an opportunity will appear to offer a little bit of explanation, or to say, and to kind of set the record straight. Because by the same token, if he's lying about you, you don't want your kids' perceptions to be skewed by that forever. At some point, they should. I mean, you don't have to give all the gory details, but they should have an idea that there was a reason for what went on, and part of it had to do with a level of disorder. Okay, so Liz says, thank you for the compliment. Likes my shirt. And sadly, they sure do make terrible parents. They really do. In fact, I do a lot of consultations with people who are involved in these, terrible romances, or they were romances. Now they're just traps. But many, many times, as we get into it, they tell me, what they're experiencing and everything, and they're trying to figure out, how they got into this situation. And many, many times, the sociopath that they're romantically involved with is just like their mother or father. So if you've had a childhood where one of your parents, or sometimes both of the parents, are disordered, know that it makes you vulnerable to getting involved with disordered people as an adult. So that's like the root of the pain that needs to be relieved. So that's why it's important to know what these people are, and to, recognize that, you didn't get the type of parenting that you really deserved, and it affected you. So, okay. Well, that seems to be all the comments for today. Thank you very much, everybody, and I look forward to speaking to you next Tuesday at 8 p.m. ET, Eastern Time. So I'll see you then.